Thanks everybody for coming out for the first seminar of the spring 2016 semester. My name is Travis. I'm the president of the Marine Robotics Club, and today we've got two of our members, Amany Shokrey and Jose Betancourt, bringing you a seminar on Matlab, how to use it, how to love it, and now I'll give it over to them.
Hey everybody, my name's Amany. I am an ocean engineering student here at Florida Atlantic University, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit of the rundown on our Intro to Matlab course. So this seminar series is designed for basically people who haven't used Matlab before. Maybe you have some sort of other programming experience. However, we're going to give you the basic fundamentals of what you need to know for Matlab and how to get started. So the first thing that you guys all need to do is open up your Matlab program on your computer. So we are using a little bit of an older version of Matlab, so we're going to go back and forth between the split screens. So this one is the command window. And
Pardon me, Amany.
Yes.
For the FAU students out there, could you show them where they want to go to get Matlab?
Yeah, sure. So FAU has a built-in VMware program. So what I usually do is I go to Google and I type in FAU ENG portal. And right here, the first link, the VMware Horizon View. And then click on that.
So this one actually doesn't open on that computer, but that's where you could go?
Yes, this is connected to the internet, so it runs pretty quickly than when you have a separate VMware, because you can also download the horizontal client. And you just type in your FAU email, and you change the domain from IRM to FAU, and you're good to go. You just type in Matlab in the search menu, and you're good to go. So this is the editor window. This is where you will be typing all of your code. So to open this up, you're going to go to your main window of Matlab, and you're going to go to the file dropdown, and you're going to type, the first one is new, and you see there's a list there. The first one is script, so that's the one that we're actually going to open up, and that is basically where you will be typing all of your code, and then when you run it, the output data and anything that you have defined in your script that you want to display will show up in your command window. So the first one is what we'll primarily be using. It's the script, and then you can also go to the drop down and you can create other things such as functions, classes, GUIs, models, all sorts of other things. But for this session of Matlab, we'll primarily be using the script. So just a little bit about Matlab. The way it works is you type your code in the script and then you run it through the command window. So a few of the commands that we generally use at the beginning of our Matlab code are CLC is a command to clear the command window. So we generally type that at the beginning of the script, and then every time you run your code, the command window will automatically clear for you. Another one that I use is clear all. And that basically clears the history of all the previously used variables that you defined. So in Matlab, we define variables such as, I'll show you, a equals 5. So you're telling the program that you're allocating the number 5 to a. So you're saying that a equals 5, and then you end with a semicolon to have that variable not show up in the command window. So if you go to the command window, oops. Sorry. If you go to you go to the script, and you hit this little green button with the triangle, it's to save and run your program. So here we're going to save our program. I already have a file created for today's seminar series. So I'm going to title it Seminar Series. All right. Yeah, so classic error, you can't use spaces when you're typing in titles for Matlab. It doesn't like spaces, so I typically don't use spaces. So if we go to run our program right here, and if you see the command window displays a equals 5, and if we were to put the semicolon and now run our program, the command window won't display equals 5, and it will delete all the previous information you had in the command window because you typed CLC at the beginning of your program. And another one that I also like to use is close all whenever I'm importing data or using figures to plot data on a graph. That will automatically close all of your windows. Typically, sometimes you'll be working with multiple windows, so it's just nice to have that because you don't have to, go down to the bottom and close all the windows manually. Matlab will do it for you. So those are some typical commands that you'll be using when you use MATLAB. Good things to do are often just to save your work often, so you don't lose any of it. So typically everybody normally uses semicolons after to define program statements, and so that the variables don't appear on the command window. So another typical thing that programmers do is when they type a line of code, they use comments to say what each line is doing, so that if somebody else is looking at their code, or you create code and you have not previously, if you haven't looked at this code in maybe a few years, you're refreshing your memory, you're looking back, you're going to say, okay, that's what that line is doing. So the way to do comments in MATLAB is you use the percent sign, and it'll show up in green. So I'm going to say this line, or this command, will clear the command window. This line will clear all previously defined variables in your history, and then this will close figure windows. Yes.
Could you show me where the previously defined variable will show up?
Yeah, sure. So if you the newer versions of MATLAB, you can actually put the editor window and the command window on one part of the screen. But here's the command history right here. So if you can see, I used previously, or on this computer previously used many commands, and you can also type in the command window clear all CLC, and that's small. And so, okay, so that's the command history. Those are all the previously commands that you used, and here are the variables that you have defined. And then on the left here are basically files that you've previously used. So this is considered the workspace in MATLAB. And we're going to go back to our script. Alright, so the first thing, okay, so that is how you define a comment. And then another comment that I typically like to use is a block comment, so it'll be 2. And then if you notice that there's a line here that pops up, so basically this is making a distinction here that this is going to be a separate area of code. And it's really cool because I don't think we can do it in this version, but in the new version of Matlab, you can actually use a block comment to separate parts of your code, and you can actually just run that section. So if you're testing part of your code for errors, that's typically a really good way to kind of debug your program. And what I mean by debug is remove all the errors or find maybe a syntax error that you had somewhere along the line. Typically when you have errors, they'll pop up in the command window of Matlab. So this is the command window, and it'll usually display like a red message indicating the line of the error, and typically it'll say some sort of error message like what went wrong or what it thinks went wrong. A lot of the times it's due to improperly using functions. You have to, MATLAB is very case sensitive, so you have to define everything accordingly to the way that MATLAB interprets the function. Alright, so the first kind of thing we're going to get started here with are matrices. So we're going to do some matrix operations and an example of how to use them. So, matrix operations. So for those of you who don't know, a matrix is a rectangular array of numbers that contains various elements. So matrices obey the rules of addition, multiplication, subtraction, and there are certain ways to define those in MATLAB. So first I'm going to create I'm going to call this matrix A. So the way that you define a matrix in MATLAB is you tell it the variable name. So I'm saying that I want this matrix to be called matrix A. And then you use the square brackets. I typically type in the whole bracket and then I fill it in, and then I use my semicolon so that it does not show up in the command window. I typically do that for all my functions just so that I know that I didn't miss the end bracket. A lot of people do that sometimes and you'll get an error message. And then the way to define a row vector in MATLAB is just to use spaces between the numbers. So we're just going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is one whole row of a string of numbers. And then the way to define a column vector is to put the semicolon after each of the numbers, and that indicates that there's going to be a new row after that number. So we're going to do A and B. And for the purpose of this example, I'm going to use a couple of different numbers. All right. All right, so now we have our matrix A and our matrix B. So we're going to perform some matrix operations. So I'm going to create a variable called C. And basically, the way you do matrix multiplication of A times B would be A and then the star and then times B. And MATLAB is case sensitive, So you want to make sure that whatever you define your variable as, it comes up. And then we're going to go ahead and run this program. And then we're going to look at the command window. Oh. Yes, sorry. Okay, so we're going to, right, we have to transpose B because that's how you multiply matrices. Right, so this apostrophe at the end of the matrix represents the transpose, so you're changing the rows to the columns. Each corresponding row will become a column. And then you can also do it with the semicolons as I showed previously. So if you see in your command window in C, it multiplied out each number for you, and it'll display in the command window. So we're going to go ahead and put a semicolon because I don't really want to see that in the command window. And we're going to do dot product. So we're going to call this one D. And then the way you define this in Matlab is there's a built-in function called dot. And then you would do A, comma, B. So that's how it's defined. In Matlab, the dot product. And the next one we're going to do is element by element multiplication. So I'm going to add in my comments so that when you guys look at this later, you'll know what each line is doing. So this dot, like the period symbol after the first matrix represents that you're doing element by element multiplication. So we're going to go ahead and run that. Right, yeah. I keep forgetting. Okay, so in order to do element by element, let's see here. Where am I getting it in? Let's see here. Oh, okay, so now I keep changing the matrix back and forth, so it's giving me an error. So C, I'm going to comment that out for right now. And we're going to run for E, so you guys can see the element by element. Alright. Gonna see. Alright, so that's element by element division. Go ahead and clear that. Put that back. Alright, so now you can see the element by element multiplication and the element by element division. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and hide those. And you can add the transpose to each of the vectors like I did here. So since we're doing the element by element multiplication and division, the matrices have to be the same size. So they have to have the same number of rows and columns. So here, A and B have the same number of rows and columns. And then for the multiplication, we have to transpose the B for the dot product too. So the last one that we're going to use is the summation function, or the second to last one. So just using H here, so the sum of A dot B right. And the last one we're going to use is, so that's it for this example. So that's some matrix operations for you guys. A lot of it's if you've taken any math courses, a lot of it's kind of repetitive, but now you know how to do it in Matlab. And so let me just add a couple comments here. Element by element So the next thing that we're going to go over.
Okay. Amany, would you mind going over, are you good to go over element by element multiplication on the board maybe?
Should we turn on the...
Actually, yeah, that's summation, the last one. Is that by element multiplication? And then summing?
So when you don't have the dot there, the summation doesn't work. it'll give you this error message. So in order for, because it's multiplying each, so it's multiplying the first number in A and the first number in B, and it's adding those together, and then it's multiplying the second number in A, the second number in B, and it's actually doing the same thing as the dot product. That's why you guys get the same value. That essentially is what the dot product is. Since there's only, one number in each, each one is, so it multiplies A1, the first element in A, times the first element in B. So it's the same value as the dot product. It's just, this is how you define it using the summation function. Two ways to essentially do the same thing, but the dot product's a little different in that case, because you want to multiply each element. In this case, you might not be, for the summation, you won't always be using it for that purpose.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so the next example that we're going to go over are basically loading text files. And plotting data. So if you have an Excel spreadsheet, you can actually take that data. Maybe you have some data in an Excel spreadsheet and you want to plot it in Matlab. You can certainly do that. There in the top right-hand corner of the Matlab window, there's the file, and then if you go all the way down, there's import data. So it'll open up a new window, and you can open up the file that you want to import the data from, and you can select an Excel file and import the data, and it'll save your data into the workspace in Matlab, so that you can call upon that data and use it to plot, for example. So this is the older version of Matlab, so it can be found under the file dropdown. In the newer version of Matlab, there is actually a button in the top hand window, I believe in the editor portion. It'll be like a big window that says import data. So that's an easy way to access, anything that you want to put into Matlab from Excel. So down here we actually have some stuff already typed up in Excel. Just a couple numbers. We're just going to plot a straight line. So these are arbitrary. We made them up. But in some cases, you'll actually have, if you're doing research or whatnot, you want to use Matlab. It's a great way to import your data. So you actually don't need the Excel open. I just wanted to show you guys some of the stuff we had in case you want to type it out and follow along. Is anybody still typing? Yeah? So in Matlab, you can also define, like say you have a certain amount of data, and you can also define it as a vector like we did before, as a column vector, for example. So you would, set this variable to whatever you want it to be called, maybe X or Y, and you would do the square brackets and separate each line by a comma to denote that you're starting a new row. And
Amany, question for you.
Yes.
So when you're importing data, the space between your X variable and this, it doesn't have to be constant.
No. So what you do in Matlab is you go to the import data, and it'll pop up So here I have selected the straight line, so that's what we'll be using. And in the newer version, it's pretty simple. You just click on the top row and you can rename it. So here, if we open this up, this is called untitled right now because we haven't given it a name. So I want to give it the name X, and then the first column I want to call X, and the second column I want to call Y. For some reason it's highlighting all of them. So yeah, so basically everything that you have in Excel will pop up here in this window. Since we only have numbers in the first two columns, it'll pop up with the first two. But if you started on the third column, it would most likely pop up with just either an empty column, or it wouldn't show that column at all. So what you want to do is you want to highlight this entire column, and there's a green button called Import. So click on that, and it'll say the following variables were imported Y, and it tells you the size of that vector, or that column, I guess. How many so you can hit Shift and select the whole thing. So that one we called Z, and it's the same size as Y. So we're going to open up our editor window, and you can either type to label your plot windows. You can either just type figure like so, or if I'm doing multiple plots, I usually use a parentheses to indicate which figure it is, and it'll pop up at the top window when you run it, and it'll say figure 1. I just do it for organizational purposes, and if you're doing multiple plots, it just keeps everything organized. So figure 1, and I want to plot Y, comma Z. So we can go ahead and close the editor window because we're done with that. And as you see, if you try to run it in the script, it pops up with an error message, which it should because you have not yet saved that variable. So it'll pop up in the workspace, but it won't pop up. So in the command window, you could type plot Y, comma Z, or whoops. Alright, something's wrong here. Oh, okay. So, typical mistake, and this happens to me all the time. You need to get rid of clear all at the top of your script, because that will delete what you literally just imported. So we're going to go ahead and quickly import the data again. So we're going to import that as X now. You can, variable name doesn't really matter. Oops. Make sure you select all of them and change the variable name so they're not the same, because it'll just overwrite the other one. So now we have that selected. Perfect. Okay, so now we're going to go to our command window. Close this. And we're going to plot x comma y. So here it pops up with a figure and the data that you plotted. And in order to actually save this plot, you want to do it in the script window. And a few other things that you need to know. So this is the plot function, and you can, so the first is the x, the second is the y, obviously, and then to change, you can plot multiple things on the same graph. So you could do z comma b, for example, and those are arbitrary numbers, assuming that they're separate sets of data, and it'll plot another line. And you can also change the color of the line so the default is blue, so you can change it to red by adding this little r with the 2 apostrophes after the x and the y. And that will change the color of the plot. You can find all of the colors and all of the symbols and by going to the command window and clicking help and plot. And in a second here, it'll pop up with all of the colors here. And instead of having a straight line, you could have a line of stars or plus signs, diamonds, squares, whatever you want it to be. So the help function is great because Matlab basically provides you with all the information about the function. You just hit help in the command window, a space, and you type the function. Make sure you spell the function right, obviously. And that will give you basically all the information you need to know about the function and how to define. See here, they did BD, so that means they want blue, and then they don't want it to be a straight line, they want it to come in increments of diamonds. So if I show you in the command window, if you go to plot and then x comma y comma what they had b, bd, and now instead of a straight line, it'll pop with blue diamonds. And another few functions that you can go to the command window and type in are help x label, so that's to label the x-axis, and the help y label, that's to label the y-axis. Help y label, so that will give you more information on that. And then you can also create a legend, help legend, and this is really cool because you can have it allocate where you want the legend to be, so you can place it in the top left corner, the top right corner, or even outside the plot. And you do this by typing either, like north would be the inside plot near the top, so this would be actually on the plot itself. And then one of the ones that say outside would be if you have a really complicated plot or you have a lot of lines going on and you don't want the legend to be in the way, you can actually put it outside and it'll create a section outside. So that's another function. So there's X label, and then I'm just going to call it X. Y label, Y. And give a title to your plot by using the title function. So, example 2. You can call it anything you want. And you need those apostrophes, and you want it to show up in purple so that you know that means it's good to go. And alright, I'm going to save that. But we still didn't load our data so that it's saved into the actual script. So now we want to go get out of the help window, and I want to type in X and Y. This is how I usually do it. So save X, save Y, I believe. Wait a minute. Trying to find the command history, the workspace. So if you add in your workspace by going back to File, mine somehow got disconnected. You go to File, or I'm sorry, Desktop, and then drop down, and you can click on the select the ones that you want to keep in there. So here in your workspace, you see down here are X and Y, and it tells you that they're the same size, which allows us to plot. And you can come back into your script and load X, load Y. Needs to be before you plot it so that your data is saved. Let me just make sure. Yeah, so here we go. This is our plot. Down here is the X label, the title, Y. You can make the line thicker by adding after the title. You can add a comma and another apostrophe, and you can type line width, and then you end it, and you type in 2. So if you increase, so 2 will make it thicker. Hold on, let's try 5. Wait a second. So the good thing about Matlab is if you know, there's a lot of functions, so if you forget how to define a function, you can always go to help. Help plot. Oh, okay, so the W needs to be capitalized. That is extremely important. So it didn't pop up when I typed in help line width because I did not capitalize the W. So it's not going to pop up because it's a function under the plot. But here we have to capitalize the W And this is just some fancy stuff on how to make your plot look nicer. Oh, wait a second. Oh, okay, so, pardon me. That can't go in the title. That needs to go next to plot. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so everything that you want to change with your plot, you change, like if you want to change the width of the line or the color or the symbol that you're using, you do it next to plot. And plot takes in as many plots as you want to have on that figure, so you can keep going. It's a little different when you have multiple lines on. You don't need to define this after every single variable. So you would, for example, you would put this at the end of, you would put like the line width at the end of the X. So, okay, so for line width, for if you want to change only the line of the X and Y line that you created, you would do it like this. But if you had multiples and maybe you wanted them to be different sizes for some reason, you would do it after each. Or you could just have one statement saying line width, comma 5 at the end. And it would change all of the lines that you have on your plot. So there we go. So that's a thicker line. And it's in red. And if we want to change it to, for example, blue diamonds,